is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Be sure to go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. And whether you're listening on the listening platforms like Spotify or Apple Music, or you're watching over on YouTube, go check out the description. We got a couple links in there. We have a Facebook and an Etsy link for everything custom design. Our friend Haley Wagner's business. She does customized clothing. You can get Pittsburgh clothing, sports clothing. It's everything custom designed, so you can really get it all. We had a lot of holidays recently. Not a lot of holidays coming up, but, never know. Maybe some Easter stuff, maybe some Valentine's Day stuff in the future. But go check her out. She's got a Facebook and an Etsy page. We got them both linked in the description of the shows, whether you're on the listening platforms and over on the YouTube, like I said. And that's it. Steelers show. And we have a happy Steelers show, at least for another 1 week. We weren't sure going into this last week. It was up in the air whether the Steelers were going to take care of their own business and if they were going to get some help. They got their business done, and they got the help that they needed in the first game, so us Steeler fans did not have to sweat it out all day. We got it in the early afternoon, knowing that we were going to make the playoffs. It was just who we were playing. But one more week of at least a happy Steelers show where we get to talk about the Steelers making the postseason.
Yeah, and thank goodness that the Titans did pull through, right? Because you mentioned we didn't have to sweat it out. Well, we had to sweat it out. The Dolphins didn't take care of business on Sunday Night Football. So if the Jaguars would have beat the Titans, the Steelers would not have qualified for the postseason. So shout out to Mike Vrabel in his last game as the Titans head coach. Fired
that's
today,
nuts, by the way. That's nuts.
Yeah.
I think he's a really good coach. I think even though the Titans haven't had a ton of success under Vrabel, I think he's still one of the better coaches, and he's at least a top half coach.
Look at the roster
the
that
NFL.
They had there. I mean,
absolutely. I think that's crazy. I think that he's either going to go to the Patriots if that's a move that could happen, or he's easily going to be another head coach somewhere.
There is some talk though. As an alum, would he have interest if Ohio State moves on from Ryan Day? Yeah.
That could be interesting. College might pay more if we're being completely honest.
Totally different realm though. Does he have any interest in like the recruiting side of things and stuff?
That's true. But it's still nuts that a top half head coach is fired, and he's easily going to be a head coach somewhere. But that's crazy to me that they let him go.
I do agree with you. I think if I had to make a guess right now, it is the Patriots, because I fully expect that one way or another, don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I expect them to part ways with Bill Belichick. Not sure what the terminology of it will be like, but I think they aggressively pursue Vrabel once that is officially taken care of. So,
and I got to imagine that the Patriots, and maybe this is just my head canon of the whole thing, and it's like I just can't imagine them having an offensive coach. So Vrabel seems like a easy pick of guys that are like going to be candidates for a head coaching job as a defensive coach to just snag him up. Not only just because of the head coaching experience, but it's like I have a hard time just imagining the Patriots with an offensive like styled head coach.
Also, you got to imagine, like, I know that it hasn't been great there recently, obviously, for New England, but there's going to be like quite a burden on whoever takes over post Belichick, like because of all the success that they had there. I feel like he's the type of guy, because of his him having roots there and like actually being the extension of the Patriot way, is a guy that can shoulder that. Like, I think that there's very few guys they could bring in and sell to the fan base. I feel like he is one of them.
Yeah, probably. It's going to be like maybe this is a bad example, but I was going to say it's going to be like whenever they bring in Kenny Pickett as the backup quarterback or the replacement quarterback for Ben Roethlisberger. It's like it's going to be hard to fill those shoes no matter what and sell it to the fan base. But Pickett was probably the best case scenario for selling it to the fan base for what they had available. I hopefully see that Vrabel would have better success than Kenny Pickett is seen as the Steelers quarterback replacement. But I think you can understand what I'm saying there.
Yeah, and then Kenny Pickett had to play football games. So then it kind of started to go downhill from there. Speaking of, Mike Tomlin spoke today, and I don't think that there was any question in our minds how this was going to play out, but Mason Rudolph named the starter for the playoff game. Did we even mention that they're going to Buffalo? So the opportunity after Jacksonville was eliminated by Tennessee was either going to be going to Kansas City as the 6th seed or going to Buffalo as the 7th seed, which, by the way, what a come up for Buffalo. I mean, they win 5 straight to end the season at 1.6-6, and at 6-6, their next 2 games were against Kansas City and Dallas. They look dead in the water, but they end up being the number 2 seed in the AFC. Anyways, Tomlin, go ahead.
Like, can we talk about just would you have rather played Kansas City or Buffalo? Because I think the clear-cut, easy answer is Kansas City. That you would have rather.
Yeah.
And this, he's saying that you would rather play the Chiefs than any other team, especially going to Arrowhead in the postseason. But I just feel like based off of the trends that the teams have been on over the past month and a half, especially, I would have much rather been going to Arrowhead this weekend.
Well, it's like all the daunting things about Kansas City aren't actually related to the football team this year, right? We're talking about like what they can be, what they have been, the idea of playing in that atmosphere. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes at any point can turn it on. Andy Reid is still a great head coach. Steve Spagnuolo always gets the most out of that defense, despite maybe not having the most talent. Actually, this year, I think you could argue that that's the strength of their football team, and the only reason that they are sitting where they are is because of the defense. But I agree with you, because of the lack of weapons on that offense, because of their inability to stop the run, I would have preferred them as a matchup for the Steelers. But unfortunately, the Dolphins didn't take care of business, and here we are. Also, it changed the time that we were playing. We would have been playing Saturday night, the exclusive Peacock game, though we would have had it in the local market here against Kansas City. But instead, we're Sunday, 1 o'clock, CBS, Nance, Romo, that crew. But yeah, how did we get here? Mason Rudolph wins 3 in a row. He's named the starter for the playoff game, not to the surprise of us, I don't think. But, you know, does it, again, we talked about this last week. Man, if you were really sold, like Alan and I were talking about this because who was it? I think it was Rappaport, either him or Tom Pelissero. One of them put out this week, like, it doesn't change. They still hearing internally from the Steelers that they feel like Kenny Pickett is the guy going forward. But, like, I don't know. If you feel like he's the guy going forward, he's not losing his starting job because of injury. Like, that guys, and this is around the league, Alan has told me this. Guys never want to see other guys lose their job because of injury. And if he felt like he was the franchise quarterback, that's his spot as soon as he comes back. Yet here we are about to play a playoff game, and he's not playing in favor of a guy that started this season as the number 3 quarterback on the depth chart. I don't know. They can say that they have belief in there, that he's the guy long term. Actions speak louder than words to me, and I can't imagine that is how they actually feel, or at least overwhelmingly feel. There might be individual people that feel that way, but like as a whole, if they had to make a decision right now on that, I don't think that they have that belief.
Well, I mean, the Steelers aren't stupid, or at least I hope they're not stupid, but I feel like you got to realize that your team is better with Mason Rudolph at quarterback, or at least they have shown that they're better with Mason Rudolph at quarterback than they have all year with Kenny Pickett than they were last year with Kenny Pickett outside of a few games. The only way that I can think that they could sell that is that it kind of like in hockey where if you have a hot goaltender, you're just riding the hot hand. That's the only way I can imagine them selling is like Kenny's still our future quarterback. Like, we know Mason Rudolph is not the future of this team. We don't plan on him being the future after this season. And it's kind of like what we related to I think last week whenever I brought up Nick Foles and everything. Like, Nick Foles went on that Super Bowl run, but then Carson Wentz was the starter the following season. Like, maybe there's some belief that like Kenny Pickett to open the 2024 season is going to be the starter. And there's probably some belief in that room that he's going to be the long-term starter for the Steelers still. But they're not dumb where you look on the field this season and it's a clear difference maker for what Mason Rudolph has been doing on the field versus what Kenny Pickett did. And you got to ride the hot hand moving forward. You're 3-0 with Mason Rudolph. And obviously he's not been a world beater. He's not been Josh Allen. He's not been Mahomes or Tua or really any of the other playoff quarterbacks. He's not them, but he's been winning you football games and he's been orchestrating the offense in a manner that is acceptable for the coaches, acceptable for the fans. I mean, the offense has looked better in this 3-game stretch than it has looked all season. And that's including a game where they probably rained 10 inches during the duration of that game. And the offense still looked better at times during that torrential downpour than it did in clear weather whenever Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky was in at quarterback. And obviously there's parts of that that's probably the Steelers offense figuring out, hey, maybe we should just run the ball because we have two great running backs. Our offensive line is figuring things out and we're deep into the season. Maybe we should just continue to run the ball. I mean, which they did, especially in this past game against the Ravens. They figured out very quickly that Najee Harris was going to be the workhorse for this game. But I think part of that too is that just Mason Rudolph has been able to orchestrate this offense enough to where he is doing enough to win you the games and make it look efficient on the field. And obviously part of that's the play calling that's going in and they're running the ball more, but he's not killing you through the air. He's not giving the ball away. He's making throws when he needs them. And that's part of the thing that Kenny wasn't doing. Some of the things that we talked about Kenny having that we never really thought would go away is the accuracy of Kenny Pickett. And that still wavered at times this season. And it looked like it was getting better, but then it's still kind of diverted back again. And from that point, Mason Rudolph is the clear-cut starter, and I don't think that the Steelers could make any other choice but that. Obviously, that questions their statement of he's the starter. Kenny Pickett is the starter moving forward, but Mason Rudolph had to be the starter in this playoff game. He has to because your offenses look better with him than anybody else under center.
Yeah, I just, so my thing is I'll bring like this example in Jacksonville, who didn't qualify for the playoffs, but they threw Trevor Lawrence back out there when probably in most cases like he wouldn't have been playing. Like there were probably several weeks down the stretch here that he should have been playing because he was healthy enough and he's the franchise guy, despite the fact that even just the week before CJ Beathard got them a win. They threw Trevor Lawrence back out there for a must-win game against Tennessee because they know that he's the franchise guy. Like, I just feel like if Pittsburgh had that same belief in Kenny Pickett, despite what, at that point, it would have been 2 wins in a row instead of 3 from Mason Rudolph. Despite that, I feel like if you have that strong of a belief in Kenny Pickett, regardless of the optics of it, because people in the fan base would have been pushing back if you sit Mason after back-to-back 30-point games. Regardless of that, I think if the belief was there for him to be the franchise guy, you got to stick to your guns and put him out there. Not only did they not do it then, now I feel like I'm in full agreement on it now. Like Mason Rudolph has to be the guy. You can't go into a playoff game and then make that switch after ripping off 3 straight wins. Like, how does that look to everybody else? Where we finally feel like we're hitting their stride offensively. Things are clicking. Though I don't think like this past game's offensive performance was necessarily that great, but again, they were playing like a monsoon, so it's kind of hard to tell. They did run the football well, though, and I want to talk about that at pretty good length right after this. But just to kind of bring it full circle, yeah, there was no way that they could come off of Mason Rudolph and go back to Kenny Pickett at this point. If they were going to do it, it would have had to have happened for the finale against Baltimore. But I totally get them not doing it. It just, to me, goes against their belief, regardless of what they want to say. Because I think in most cases, you look around the league and teams would do the opposite if they had a belief that their franchise guy was returning from injury.
I mean, maybe majority of those people don't actually believe that. I mean, maybe they feel like they just have to say that because he was their first-round quarterback just a year and a half ago. They took him 20th overall a year and a half.
And I get that. Yeah, I'm not saying that like that I
because if we're being honest, I mean, eye test stats, whatever you want to use, they all point to Kenny Pickett is not your guy, and you're going to have to find another quarterback. And I understand that's only 2 seasons worth of work, but typically after 2 seasons, you would at least feel more comfortable that he's going to progress more and more, that he would be your starting quarterback. Right now, I'm thinking about who else is going to be a quarterback in 2024 that could potentially push to be a starter next year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the lows have been far too low, and I don't think there's been enough highs. So, and I think that he's gotten a little bit longer of a leash than you see a lot of guys have, for better or worse. I don't have a problem. We've talked a lot about the patience or lack of with first-round picks a lot of the times for quarterbacks. And I guess the difference with Kenny as opposed to a lot that we're talking about is they typically go to bad situations, because we're talking about guys that go at like the top of the draft or things like that. It's very rare for a quarterback to just like sit there and get what they believe is their guy at 20. That's why it was just like that was such a weird year for quarterbacks. We knew that going into it. But it's not like Kenny went into a bad situation like those guys in terms of the stability of the organization. However, certainly you could say when you pair him with Matt Canada, it was a bad situation within the offense. So I don't know. Kenny Pickett's been a hard evaluation for sure, but I think you still strip away the things that aren't necessarily within aren't his fault, and you still see a player that I just have a hard time believing is the franchise guy.
I was texting a friend of mine this weekend, and I gave him what could be considered a hot take. I'll give it to you now. After watching all of this season, I think that the biggest issue with the offense was not Matt Canada, it was the quarterbacks. And it was specifically the other two quarterbacks that weren't Mason Rudolph, because watching Mason Rudolph operate in the same offense, regardless of whether Matt Canada is the actual play caller or not, it's the exact same offense that was being called whenever he was here. It looks way more functional with Mason Rudolph as quarterback. And I think that the bigger problem is Kenny Pickett and Mitch Trubisky than it was Matt Canada.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, I think that kind of goes back to what we've talked about, where it's not like a high ceiling offense, but it wasn't even able to operate at what its floor should be because of the quarterback play. And that was with both of them. Like, at least Kenny wasn't turning the football over the way that Mitch was, but they weren't putting up the points either. So, is it really...
He wasn't turning over the football, but he also wasn't doing any of the proper decision making. He wasn't making the right reads and everything. He wasn't operating functionally within that offense, even though he didn't turn over the ball.
Right. So, yeah, I have to agree. At the same time, and I don't think that you're saying this, it's not like either of us are sitting here saying Mason Rudolph is the franchise quarterback or anything like that.
I still think that they need to overhaul the offense. Like the scheme of the offense, and I'm not saying Mason Rudolph is the quarterback, but really that's what I'm saying is, like, a guy that I don't think is the future of your franchise, a guy that was your third string quarterback, he's able to operate your offense at a functional level better than your first two quarterbacks were. To me, that is a quarterback problem, not a coordinator problem.
Well, and that to me is almost, and I'm not trying to take away from Mason by saying this, but it's almost like the success that's being had is more indicative of the guys that weren't having the success than it is the guy that's having success.
Yeah, man, I'm really not trying to backhand compliment Mason Rudolph right now.
No, and you know what? Like, for Alan and I on the other show, our comments are always about, like, people for whatever reason think that we hate Mason Rudolph and love Kenny Pickett, no matter the way that the discussion goes. And it's just insane. I mean, we've both said that we think Mason should be the starter for this game as well. We've said that he's played well. He's given them their best quarterback games of the season. It doesn't matter what we say. We come off as Mason haters for whatever reason, because we don't believe that he is the future at the position for the team. And I still feel that way. One thing that I don't think is in doubt is primarily the reason for success here has been the ground game over the last couple of weeks. And honestly, it's been more Najee Harris than Jaylen Warren. Like, there's times for sure when it's been both of them, but Najee's been the more consistent one down the stretch here. And this has been a theme for him, I feel like, over his entire Steelers tenure, where he's just getting better, not only as the game goes on, but as the season goes on. I mean, he had arguably his best game on Saturday against the Ravens, had his most touches, 31 in that game total, adding 5 receptions to his 26 carries. But yeah, I mean, he's been able to take on these large workloads and punish people. I think that's probably what it is. Like, the way that he's built to not only take on the punishment, but also start dishing it out. I think that's why he is that type of back that gets better as games and seasons go on. But man, he's been really impressive. And as you got people, I know that we joke around about me being like a Najee hater, or like, and me not thinking that I'm necessarily committed to the idea of him being around here long term, whatever you want to consider long term to be. But certainly right now, the Steelers have needed him. And if they are going to have any shot at beating the Buffalo Bills, it's going to be largely due to what Najee Harris does in that football game.
100%. I mean, Najee, especially in these past 3 games to close out the regular season, has been your workhorse running back, but he's also just been the best offensive player as well. And especially in these last few games is what we're focusing on. Like, yeah, like there's certain times where Najee, like, there's rightfully so, people will complain about his play and will call out and say Jaylen Warren should be the starter and stuff. We totally get that. I mean, we had those discussions earlier this season, and we understand that. But you're seeing the value that Najee Harris brings in these last few games. And I think you're absolutely right moving forward with this Bills game, playoff game. the way that they're going to have to win is with time of possession. They're going to have to control the clock better and be the team that can really run down that clock and capitalize on their opportunities. And you're going to do that by having a guy like Najee Harris have the games that he had against Baltimore and against Seattle, where he's running for 150 plus, he's touching the ball 25 plus times in a game. And you're relying on him to not only get you where you want to go offensively in terms of like the yardage, but he's not turning over the ball, and you need to be able to gain those first downs with a run game like that to be able to eat that chunk of time that you need to be able to, because for how fast the Bills can score, especially then this is going against a better team against Miami and whoever else they were playing, like with the way that our secondary is kind of set up right now. I would expect Joey Porter Jr. to be shadowing Stephon Diggs the entire game. And then you need people to cover Gabe Davis. You need people to cover Shakur. You need someone to cover Dalton Kincaid. Tight end has been a position that has torched the Steelers defense over the past season. And there's going to be some need for some chunk plays in terms of being able to burn the clock. You need to be able to burn offensive clock. That's how they're going to do it. Najee Harris is the biggest part of that. I think that he's going to be the key to this game. Realistically.
Yeah, I think one thing I got to give the Steelers, offensive game planning, Mike Sullivan, Eddie Faulkner, a lot of credit here, because at first it didn't look good when they first took over. But what they've done the last 2 weeks, in my opinion, is really find the balance of this offense and realize when one guy has it. You know what I mean? Like with Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, I feel like you got to find a balance each game. And it's not like, okay, we're going to go into this game and it's 50-50 split every single time. You got to recognize which guy has it and which guy doesn't have it that day. Jaylen Warren put the football on the ground a couple times on Saturday in those bad conditions. Najee was very good from the outset, and I think they recognized that. So it was a Najee Harris day. We've seen times in the past where it's been a Jaylen Warren day, where he seems like the better back that day and he kind of dominates the touches. I think that this offensive staff has done a much better job as of late in terms of recognizing that and utilizing that. And also that it's going to create, when they're running the ball like that, create a lot of one-on-ones on the outside. We didn't see George Pickens featured at all in the passing game on Saturday. Again, taking the weather conditions into consideration here, there weren't a lot of people that were utilized in the passing game. I mean, Damontae had that obviously one long touchdown, but outside of that, Najee led them.
I mean, it's not
Najee led them in receptions with 5. So it wasn't like a game where, Mason had 18 completions. So it wasn't the super heavy passing game. But I give them credit for looking at the opponent, having a game plan going into the game, and then adjusting accordingly. I thought they've done that really well now 3 weeks in a row here since the Seattle Baltimore to close out the season. Hopefully they continue to do so against Buffalo. Conditions certainly going to be a factor again, and that's why I said this run game just got to keep cooking, because I think that's like the blueprint now for them. I think we realize the way that the Steelers are going to have to win football games. They're going to have to take care of the football, run the football really well, dominate time of possession, just do enough, stay ahead of the sticks, convert third downs, make them manageable third downs for Mason to convert, take your shots calculated, and then be advantageous. We've talked about this not being a good matchup for them in Buffalo, but the one thing is, if it's not a good Buffalo team that shows up, and we've seen this team pop up where they just shoot themselves in the foot time after time this season, they'll give you opportunities to take the football away. If the Steelers do that a couple times, that is going to be the way that they make this a football game and give themselves a shot. Taking the football away, not doing that themselves on offense. I don't know. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility for the formula to be there for the Steelers to win this one. I don't know if I'm going to predict it to happen. You'll have to wait until the end of the show to see. But I think that there's a path for sure.
Well, it's not going to get easier, especially to take the ball away when you're not going to have your best player on the team in TJ Watt. I don't know. You saw that tweet of JJ. Maybe he can suit up and wear his brother's number. That would be nice. But unfortunately, with a sprained MCL, they're not going to have him, because it came out. People were reporting that it was like a torn MCL, and then JJ reported that it actually wasn't, and it was a sprained
Well, that's
MCL.
what it. So a grade 3 MCL sprain is a tear, but it was a grade 2 that he suffered.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, we're not going to have TJ Watt. And that's the really unfortunate part.
Yeah, so they were saying what, like if they get to the AFC Championship game, maybe he can play with a brace or something like that. Who knows how effective he would even be? I don't know. I'm considering his season to be done, and it's interesting because like I don't know if it's just because of the idea that we're just playing with house money at this point, like didn't expect to be here or what it is, or maybe we're just so intrigued by the idea of seeing more snaps from Nick Herbig, even though Marcus Golden will probably take on more than Herbig will in the absence of Watt. But it just doesn't seem like there's like this like overwhelming sadness about not having TJ out there. Like it doesn't seem like it's affecting the way a lot of people feel about this game. Probably because a lot of people weren't giving them a chance to win this one anyway. But like it's just really interesting to me. And Alan and I were talking about this, that like a lot of people aren't really like harping on this. Like Steelers fans aren't like, oh man, TJ season's over. It's just kind of like, oh dang, well, at least it wasn't an ACL tear and won't affect him next season.
Well, maybe it's that, or maybe, and this is probably the quieter section, they do believe that they'll see TJ again because the Steelers are just going to go on a run and they'll see him in the Super Bowl.
Hey, I'm here for
But
it.
I mean, without TJ in, you could do a lot
Yeah.
worse than Marcus Golden and Nick Herbig to be able to.
And they
to
have
take
done
on
a
the
lot
brunt.
worse in past seasons. Like, and I think that that's a big thing here is they finally built up some depth at the position and they feel better about Golden and Herbig behind TJ than we do like, you know, Malik Reed or Jameer Jones, the guys that were in there in the past few seasons. So yeah, I think that is definitely a part of it. But like we're talking about TJ Watt here not being available.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, maybe TJ Watt should just stop being a basketball player and actually play through the injury. How about that? Anybody talking about that? Maybe you should look at his hockey. Maybe you should look at the Penguins or something and see what those guys do.
I wonder if JJ. Well, you know what's funny? I know you're joking around, but I saw that TJ tried to come back into this game, and they had to stop him from doing so. Like he even said, "Listen, I know I'm not going to be able to play after this because it's going to swell up and be worse tomorrow, but I want to finish this game." And they're like, "No, like that's not happening."
He's like, "I want to get to 20 sacks."
Yeah, probably. But you know, I just. And maybe another part of it is the reinforcements that are coming back in other areas. Minkah Fitzpatrick slated to return. Damontae Kazee will come off his suspension for this game. So maybe it's like, you know, you feel decent about Golden and Herbig behind him. Plus, you're going to be better on the back end than you have in the last couple of weeks. So maybe that's the reason that you feel okay about this loss. But I don't think anybody feels good about it. It just seems like it's not as devastating as you would think it would be.
Yeah, I definitely get that sense too. Also, I'm just curious, and I only want to bring this up because I just joked about it. But how does it work? Where like if the NFL, if you have an injury, it's very public and you're rolled out. But like in the NHL, if you have an injury, people aren't going to know what it is, and you're going to play through it if you're in the postseason. Is the NHL like just allowed to do that? Like, are you allowed to just say like you can play through your injury, or is it just a culture thing? Like football players aren't going to play through injuries like that. Like I'm not trying to call out TJ or any other injured player, but it's just interesting the different cultures around injuries in the postseason with these sports.
Yeah, I think that in terms of like at least the information being out there, that is all part of the CBAs. So, you know, that has to be agreed upon, obviously, between not just the league, but the Players Association of each league in terms of what information is put out there. So, yeah, I don't know that will ever change from either side, but it is like you'll see, you know, the most famous example that I think of, just because it's so crazy to me, the position he plays and playing through this injury, is when Ben Bishop finished the Stanley Cup final with a torn groin. I mean, that is stupid. And then having the surgery on that afterwards. But yeah, every single year, the team, I mean, there's injuries on every team, but the team that wins the Stanley Cup every single year, the following day, you see like, oh, 8 guys have to have surgery. Yeah. Have to have surgery that would have ended
even a guy
season.
that didn't win the Stanley Cup, but it's relative because the Penguins beat him in the postseason, and then he's actually on the Penguins now. Is that after that 2017 like crazy series that we had against Ottawa, it came out that Erik Karlsson was playing with a broken foot the entire time, and it's like how do hockey players do that? And then like, and I'm not trying to call like NFL players babies or anything. I just didn't know if it was something like they are actually not allowed to play through stuff like that. Like if that's actually like an NFL rule.
I mean, maybe. I the only independent stuff comes from like neurologists, like with the head stuff. So I don't know
Yeah.
that anybody else, if there's any other injury that they could rule them out by that it's not the team doctor. So I don't know. Yeah, that
I
all
don't
is
know.
very
At least they're not
interesting.
basketball. Basketball, they cough and they want to sit out.
Load management. Imagine if TJ wasn't playing a game for load management. Where were we? Oh, yeah, this Buffalo game. Kind of still wanting to talk about this in the defense and stuff like that. You mentioned Joey Porter Jr. shadowing. I wonder if it'll be a similar thing. I don't have the same amount of respect necessarily for Buffalo's receiving core as like Seattle's, where I think that they're three deep like that. Gabe Davis has torched the Steelers in the past, but he's so boom or bust. I mean, he'll either go for 150 or not have a catch. Also dealing with a little bit of an injury, so we'll see if he's even able to go for this one. Khalil Shakir has kind of come on as of late. And Dalton Kincaid is basically receiver. I mean, that's why they have both him and Dawson Knox. They'll play a lot of 2 tight end sets and play Dalton Cade, in the slot as a big receiver. So I do wonder what the answer is there. I think that's the good aspect of getting Minkah and Kazee back is the amount of options you have there. Because we'll probably see a lot of like 3 safety sets and stuff because of the way that the Bills utilize their tight ends. Like, I'm curious what they think the answer is for Dalton Kincaid. Do you try to like high-low him? Do you see like a Michael Walker or something low and then have like Minkah playing over top or Damontae Kazee playing over top? I do think that one thing they cannot do, similarly to the Seattle game, is just throw Joey Porter Jr. on an island. Now, I'm fine if he follows Stephon Diggs around the field, but I think he's got to have some type of help over top. I mean, DK got the better of Joey Porter Jr. for sure in that matchup. Joey had his moments, but largely DK had a pretty solid day against him. And having Minkah back in the fold allows you to do that too, giving him some help over top. So I would say that's probably the one tweak that I look at here for another some like relatively talented pass catching group when you include the tight ends, plus James Cook out of the backfield. And James Cook's been really good as a runner too. I mean, he might be. I know some people were talking about him as like a second team All Pro, only behind CMC in terms of running backs. I think with Raheem Mostert scoring like 20 touchdowns this year, he's probably the guy that I would look at there. But James Cook has certainly been very good.
Speaking of touchdown totals, I was just looking at James Cook's, and for a guy that had over 1,100 yards, you would think that he has more than 2 rushing touchdowns on the season.
Yeah, it's fun because Josh Allen has 15.
He has double the receiving touchdowns that he does than rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, well, they get inside the 5, and Josh Allen's having a rushing touchdown. So I think that's the key is to limit them to field goals, bend don't break. But because they're a hard team to stop, especially in the red zone. I mean, it's most efficient red zone offense. So it's gonna be a tough matchup for sure. But I think the big thing is them creating a couple turnovers here. Getting Josh Allen early, making him do some dumb stuff because he will. I mean, that's kind of the nature of his game. He's, for better or worse, plays with a lot of reckless abandonment. It's normally for the better, but there's certainly a couple times a game where he's going to give the other team a chance to take the football away. And I think the Steelers have to take advantage of that and then not do that for themselves on offense. But yeah, very curious. Oh, you know what? One injury, like we're talking about these NHL injuries and guys playing through them. I'm not for sure that this is the injury, but I would be surprised if it doesn't come out after the season that Landon Roberts has a torn pec and he's playing through it right now.
Shouldn't we see it? Because you remember that picture of Cody Rhodes after he had a torn pec?
Mm-hmm.
Are you impressed who I know who that is?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah. I feel like we would see that bruise, I mean, that's crazy because being able to play through that, especially at the position that he plays, like how physical linebacker is, it's just that's nuts. Yeah. That's the case.
Maybe partially torn as opposed. It's just I don't know. There's not many pec injuries that you can suffer in general, and he's dealing with a pec injury right now. Missed the game, came back, but if you look when he had a tackle on Sunday, and it's on the left side, you can tell. It's just kind of like he gets up and he like holds it for a second. You can kind of tell like it's just his arm's just kind of there on the side of him. I don't know. He's dealing with something pretty significant and playing through it right now. And he was asked about it. He said,
"Look at our linebacker room."
Yeah, he was asked about it and said, "Man, I wasn't going to not play. I'm a Pittsburgh Steeler." This dude's been a Steeler for one season and like feels like he should have been here the entire time.
So you're telling me that whenever Cam Hayward tore his pec like 8 years ago, he could have just played through it? That's what I'm hearing.
That was eight years ago this year, because 2016 season was when
it
that
2016?
happened. Yeah.
You're telling me that Cam Hayward's soft? That's what Smitty just said. Did you hear that?
Hey, TJ missed quite a bit of time last year with a pec injury as well. So,
man, Landon Roberts is just revealing the truth. These guys are just soft.
Mm-hmm.
You're all pro players that you think are good. They're actually soft.
Yep. All right, let's talk about this Buffalo game specifically at this point and give some predictions, maybe a bold take or a key to the game, something like that. We'll start with that. What do you think is, and it doesn't have to be three, maybe just one from each side of the football. What do you think has to happen for the Steelers?
Well, offensively, I already said it, right? I think that you need to dominate the time of possession. And that starts with the run game. I envision that this game is going to be won with a similar formula that they did in this past game, even though the weather is not going to be a downpour, at least it shouldn't be. It should just be really cold. But I think that you're going to win with a similar idea where you're going to have to get Najee Harris a lot of touches. Hopefully he's one of the two running backs. I shouldn't just say Najee Harris. He's just been the one that's been more recent as of the last couple of weeks that's had a lot of yards, a lot of touches, a lot of carries. I think that whether it's Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, you're going to have to, or maybe even both, you're going to have a lot of touches on the ground between those two. And obviously pass where you can, like when you need to and stuff. But I just don't envision the Steelers winning this game through the air. I envision them winning it on the ground because that's how they're going to control the clock, and they have to take advantage of their opportunities whenever they get into the red zone. You can't settle for 3. You got to go for 6 and capitalize and get those touchdowns where you can, because when you're playing a high octane offense like the Bills have, you're going to have to, because if you get in a foot race with them, you're going to lose. So control the clock offensively, ground and pound with the run game. Defensively, I mean, you have to be able to limit them through the air. I think that the Steelers will be able to handle Josh Allen and James Cook enough on the ground, but what I hope does not happen is that they get beat through the air. I mean, getting Minkah back is huge. I think that's a big plus for this weekend. But still, with the way that the secondary is kind of set up right now and playing an offense like the Bills, still makes me a little uncomfortable seeing what it's going to be like, especially whenever you have guys like a Stephon Diggs and a Dalton Kincaid. And then I mean, Gabe Davis is so hot or cold, but it feels like whenever he plays the Steelers, he's hot. So when you have guys like that, I think the secondary really needs to step up big in this one, especially because you don't have TJ Watt. And now I expect that Marcus Golden and Nick Herbig are going to do their best in this game to not necessarily replicate TJ Watt, but to fill in for his shoes. But for where we say that normally this defense has to be, when in terms of the front seven has to be helping out that secondary and getting to the quarterback, making the quarterback uncomfortable, I feel like roles have to be reversed. I feel like the secondary is going to have to be that much stout in coverage to give your front guys enough time to be able to collapse that pocket and to get to the quarterback. I feel like they're going to have to be a lot more coverage sacks in this one than there are necessarily just sacks that help out your secondary. And so that's where I view it. And then special teams, something that has not been great as of the last couple of weeks that I think they need to at least have average of in this game is punting. I think you have to be able to flip the field whenever you need to, because some of the punts the last few weeks have been atrocious. And for what has been relatively, like, especially if you just look at like his yards per punt and everything, like a relatively like decent year by Presley Harvin, especially it's his best statistical year with the Steelers. You're going to need to have at least average punting. You need to be able to flip the field when you need to. And for a team that obviously can drive down the field quick, you're going to want them to start as back far as possible. So punting is going to be my main thing for special teams. You need to be able to flip the field when you need to.
Offensively, I would like to see them take some shots on the outside despite the weather conditions, because I look at the outside corners. I have a ton of respect for that safety duo, Minkah Hyde, Jordan Poyer. I think they're very good. And Johnson and the nickel is a very good nickel corner as well. But they haven't had Trey White pretty much all year with the Achilles injury. Rasul Douglas is hurt right now with a knee injury that he suffered in that game against the Dolphins. We'll see if he's able to get back for this one. If not, that would leave like Christian Benford, maybe the ghost of Josh Norman out there. They don't like playing Kyer Elam, who's been a healthy stretch for them. So I don't know what
Norman's
the plan
on the
will
Bills.
Be. Yes,
bro. If you would have asked me where's Josh Norman playing, I would have said he's retired.
Yeah, Dane Jackson, who was they took advantage of him a couple times on Sunday
Quaker
night.
Valley's finest.
And I like Dane Jackson, but I think there's plays to be had for sure if Rasul Douglas is going to miss this one. But we'll see if that's the case. Either way, dealing with a knee injury. So I would like to see them take some calculated shots at some point offensively. Defensively, I mean, it seems like so cliche when you play this team, but like I think it's gonna be important to have a QB spy a lot of the times, and contain Josh Allen in this one. What he can do with his legs. I mentioned he has 15 rushing touchdowns on this year. His ability to extend plays and make plays down the field, even when extending them, kind of throw from any angle. He'll roll all the way to the right and throw back all the way to the left. And nobody else should ever do that. But Josh Allen is one of the few guys that can do that. So yeah, I think it's going to be imperative to keep him in the pocket, get after him early and often, and hopefully create some turnovers in the process of doing so. I'm glad you brought special teams into the equation. How about this? Miles Killebrew, who already has obviously blocked some punts this season. He's blocked, 4 in his tenure of the Steelers. One of those came in Buffalo in this exact same stadium. Let's see what happened in the playoffs. Miles Killebrew will get, and that ties in. That could be a bold prediction too. Miles Killebrew blocks a punt on Sunday.
I like it. You need those types of splash plays to not only get you momentum, especially on a road game, but to win you a game against let's be honest, a superior opponent. And there's a reason that we said that
they're 10
point City than Buffalo.
They're 10-point dogs. And I feel like they probably would have been, I don't know, 6.5, somewhere between 6.5 to 7.5 against Kansas City, and they're 10-point against Buffalo.
My bold prediction will be that Josh Allen is going to throw a pick 6. I don't know who's going to return it, but he's going to throw a pick 6.
Okay,
I feel like Buffalo had such an emotional high in that Miami game, and obviously, like they were going to be in the playoffs no matter what. But I feel like that against a division rival, winning your division and everything, getting the number 2 seed, I feel like there's a chance that this could be a letdown for Buffalo. Obviously, they could still win the game, but I feel like in terms of the energy that the team's going to bring, it might not be as much as what they saw last week.
And see, that's the thing. That's the problem. That's part of the blueprint to me, is if they let the Steelers hang around a little bit early. Like if they don't come out with their foot on the gas and let the Steelers like jump out to an early lead, take control of the clock, I think that's where Buffalo could get into some trouble. So, all right, let's get into the predictions then. How do you see this one playing out?
Man, I've thought since Buffalo has been the team that the Steelers are going to play, I thought in my head that Steelers are going to lose this game. I felt way more comfortable with Kansas City. I thought that they matched up way better with the Chiefs than they do against the Bills. And there's really so many reasons to go against the Steelers in this game. But I don't care. I'm not going to do it. I think the Steelers are going to upset Buffalo. I genuinely I just feel like the Steelers found themselves into a position into the playoffs. Obviously, they needed a little bit of help. That means that hope is on their side. That means that whatever you believe in is on their side, and they didn't get on the playoffs on their own. They had to have somebody lose. That happened, and I think that the Bills are going to get upset this week. I think that's going to shock everybody because of how many people are talking about how bad the Steelers are the worst playoff team by a wide margin, and how they're the betting odds least favorite to win the Super Bowl and all that. I think that the Bills are going to get upset by the Steelers. I think they're going to go into Buffalo and beat them. I think they're going to beat them 24-23. You're going to see a walk-off field goal.
Oh, jeez. Oh, man. I don't know if I'm going to see that, because if that's the case, I might pass out before we get to that point. No, I'm going into this game like feeling good either way. Like I think I'm part of that group that I mentioned earlier with like the whole TJ injury and how people are feeling about it, where it's kind of just like house money for me. Like I didn't even expect to be here at this point. I've kind of had the same mindset since that loss to Indy going into that game against the Bengals. Don't get me wrong. Now that we're here, I certainly want to win this football game. And I would like to see them do so. I have a hard.
I said, but draft position.
Oh, I mean, especially once the playoffs, that means nothing. But yeah, I'm looking at this one. I do think that there is, I laid out the blueprint for them, that I think that there is a path here for the Steelers to win this football game. I don't see them being able to do it defensively against this team, against Josh Allen in the playoffs. Again, like there is certainly a path where Josh Allen comes out here and plays like a bonehead, turns the football over 3 times. I just expect to see a more tightened up version of this Buffalo Bills offense now that the playoffs have started. I'll say 26-16 Buffalo wins this one. It wouldn't surprise me if the Steelers do jump out and they look good early on and they're shutting Buffalo down early on. I just don't think they can do it for 60 minutes. I think at some point the defense is going to get gassed and Buffalo is going to get theirs offensively. I certainly hope you are the one out of the two of us that are right. I don't think it's impossible, but I do think the Buffalo advances. And
if we won, we'd be going to Baltimore.
Yeah, there's no question who their second round opponent is. Like we know, most Steelers fans probably feel pretty confident about that.
I would feel pretty confident. I mean, they're 2-0, and for all the Ravens fans that want to say, "Oh, you beat our backups, you beat Tyler Huntley," why did we sweep you in the regular season then? Why did we beat Lamar in the midseason?
Well, it's also not just this season. They're 7-1 in the last 4 years against them. So
I feel very comfortable about going. And how sweet would it be for all this hype around Baltimore to have them lose to the Steelers in the playoffs? And then you could go even further and say the Steelers beat the Browns in the AFC Championship. Oh my goodness.
I was just saying,
would that be?
Do we want Cleveland to lose early like this weekend against Houston? Or if we're going to win?
I mean, I want them to lose no matter what. Yeah. But if it gets to that scenario, imagine how sweet it would taste to beat Baltimore and then to beat the Browns and go to the Super Bowl, having beat Buffalo and then 2 division rivals in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, the one thing that would have been cool if the Dolphins beat Buffalo and we were the 6 and Buffalo was the 7 is I wouldn't have ruled out Buffalo going on a run from the 7th seed. And then, that was the only way that the Steelers could have hosted a playoff game.
If they were the 7, then them and Miami would have just played again in Miami.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That would have been pretty fun to see, actually.
Yeah. That would have been like, all those years where the Steelers and Ravens ended up matching up 3 times because of meeting in the playoffs. It would have felt like that. All right. Well, there you have it. Steelers, Bills, Sunday, 1:00. Looking forward to it. Hit us in the comments with your predictions, any bold predictions that you have, what you think are the keys to the game, how you feel about what we talked about. Is it the right call to roll with Mason Rudolph? And are you one of those people that we were talking about with the TJ Watt stuff, where you're kind of just like, oh, it's house money at this point, and you're just glad it's not as severe? Where are you at with TJ Watt? Why does it seem like not everybody's just completely down in the dumps about losing their star edge rusher for probably their entire postseason run? Let us know how you feel about that in the comments. Also, in the description of the show, you will see some links. Everything Custom Designs, our friend Haley Wagner's small business. Facebook and Etsy links are down below. Custom t-shirts, hoodies, all different kinds of clothing, just not any hats. So everything but hats. Custom Designs by Haley Wagner is what we like to call it. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell here. Like I said, hit us in the comments and leave us a 5-star review if you're listening somewhere else, Spotify, Apple, any of those other platforms. Until next time, this has been the Around the 412 Steelers Show. For Tyler, for myself, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.